Hey guys. I hope that you have already been aware of this new series that I'm doing. I am discussing in detail the murder mystery books written by Jonathan Kellerman. This is an author that I have a habit of rereading during my downtime. I keep his books on my phone in my Kindle app so that if I'm in line at the bank or waiting at the airport or anything where I'm just sitting and I'd normally be checking social media or checking the news or doing other things that sometimes increase anxiety, this way I can read and do something intellectually stimulating that decreases anxiety. And these are books that I enjoy enough to reread the entire series. I've reread the entire series with one exception from start to finish. And I've always kind of, when you get that invested in art, whether it's music or a television show or a book series or whatever, oftentimes you wish you could meet the characters, you could meet the actors, meet the author, the musicians, whoever. It's the equivalent of being like a crate digger and reading record credits. And there's often certain questions and pet peeves and things of mine that I've always wished I could ask the author about. And, oh, this really bothered me, or I really liked that. And I just thought I would discuss them with YouTube and see if there was an interest. Now, this video is kind of preliminary. These are my notes for the entire series as opposed to individual books. I'm going to do the individual books one at a time. I'm going to reread them for the 200 millionth time and make notes as I do so and then discuss those notes on the air. But I made some notes on the series as a whole, and that's what I'm going to be sharing here. So for those of you who aren't familiar, and if you're not familiar, this is probably not the video for you because there will be spoilers and a lot of it won't make sense without context. But for those of you who aren't familiar, these are murder mysteries. The main character is a child psychologist named Alex Delaware who consults to the Los Angeles police and then also does therapy and family court and custody cases and things of that nature. And when one of his cases turns bad, he turns to his best friend, who is homicide detective Milo Sturgis. And when Milo needs additional insight on one of his cases, he turns to his best friend, Alex Delaware. Also that features prominently among the books is that Alex is straight and dates multiple women throughout the course of the books. And Milo is gay and dates primarily one guy throughout the course of the books. And it kind of explores the friendship between a straight guy and a gay guy, which hopefully is normal to most people in 2021. But these books, the first one was written in 1985, when anything related to gay was really considered taboo. So it was probably considered groundbreaking at the time. And there's honestly still a lot of that now. I still even get some of it myself, that if I have gay friends or speak out for LGBTQ causes, then people assume you're gay and they assume negativity as a result of that. So, here are my notes from the series as a whole. And some of these I've already covered, and some of them I will cover in the individual book things, but this way they'll all be in one place. So, Jonathan Kellerman has written books co-authored with his wife and with Jesse Kellerman, who I can't remember if that's his son or his nephew or something. He's a younger family member. I've tried them. I can't read them. They don't work for me. I can't get through them. I don't enjoy them. And a lot of people that read Kellerman feel the same way. A lot of people love them. There's a book called The Web that takes place on an island, and I've tried to read it multiple times. This is solely written by him, and it's an Alex Delaware book. I've tried to read it multiple times. I can't get through it. I find it unreadable, and again, a lot of other people that read these books agree. There's a book where the main character is Sharon Ransom, and I didn't make note of the names of the books, so I'm actually going to Google that right now and see if anything comes up. Isn't the internet great? Silent Partner, that's the name. And so what happened was, somehow I had read the entire series, exception being the one I couldn't get through, and never knew this book existed. And so I'd reread the entire series multiple times, skipping this book, did not realize I was skipping a book. And there were certain plot holes in the entire series that didn't make sense to me, and then realizing there was a missing book, it answered some of those questions. But there's some things in that book that I, having now read that book multiple times, I still don't understand. And when we get to that book, I'll make notes on that. But that was something that I put in my notes before starting the reread. There's a book where the main character is Lauren Teague, and I'm going to Google the name of that one again just so I don't want to get it wrong. That's one of my favorites in a lot of ways. Flesh and Blood, that's right. It's one of my favorites, but it's not. And the note that I made for myself is that I've never wanted to hug a fictional character more than Lauren Teague. I know she's not real, and yet my heart aches for her. Like, I really find myself invested in that book emotionally, which in some ways makes me like it, in some ways makes me not like it. I wish that things in the fictional world turned out differently in that book. But when that book comes up in my rereading, I'm always like, okay, am I emotionally ready for this one? Here's something I've said before, I believe, in the introduction to this series, which is that Kellerman writes Alex as who he wishes he was. All the women love him, all his troubled clients grow up to be psychologists, and one time, Robin, his longtime girlfriend, leaves him because he's too perfect. And it's just, sometimes the fact that the writer, writes the main character as the better version of himself, sometimes that's endearing, and sometimes it's cringy. There's a character named Daniel Sharavi, and I've said his name wrong in my head multiple times, so I have to catch myself there. I've been calling him Sharavi for as long as I've read these books, and Butcher's Theater, the book that he's the main character of, which is one of my... It's a non-series book. It's not an Alex Delaware book, but it's in the same universe, and it's one of my favorites. And I've been calling him Sharavi for a decade at least, and it's Sharavi, and my dyslexia moved 2 letters. So he pops up in his book is The Butcher's Theater, and then he pops up again in at least one other book where Alex is the main character, not him, but he's there. And at the end of that book, he invites Alex to visit him in Israel, and I wish that Alex had taken him up on that. I would have loved to have seen what happened there. I really like Sharavi as a character, and I want to see more of him. Which brings me to my next point, is that I feel like Kellerman generally does a good job of discussing politics without taking sides. You can kind of guess where Milo and Alex are on the political spectrum, but it's not overt, and he's pretty critical of liberals and conservatives throughout the course of the book, as well as just politicians in general. But the books, the author, the characters, everybody is very pro-Israel and anti-Palestine, and that bothers me every time I see it. Because I would definitely classify myself as anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, and while I'm not against authors taking a political side, it seems weird to me when you consider that he does a very good job of navigating politics without being overtly biased for every topic except for this one. But when this topic comes up, there's a very clear bias, and it's not made clear in the books why, other than that I think the only Milo's boyfriend is Jewish, but as hopefully you know, a lot of Jewish people are not necessarily pro-Israel or anti-Palestine. Butcher's Theater takes place in Israel and actually does a pretty decent job of showing what it's like to live in that region and the political hotbed that it is. Again, it still very clearly takes sides, and most of the characters are Israeli and not Palestinian, although the distinction is, it's complicated, as you know if you know anything about the issue. So, in any case, that's just something that comes up, and it's a bone that I have to pick with Kellerman. Like, I get it, like, I would assume I could pretty much assume his politics in general based on the books, because there's a lot of LGBTQ issues that come up, and there's a lot of this, that, and the other thing. But he does a pretty good job. I mean, I think it's great when an author of fiction can write in such a way that somebody from any side of the political spectrum can receive their work, and he's able to pretty well do that, except in this particular issue. And then I talked about this. Did I talk about this? I feel like I've talked about this before. that his plots are very complicated, and he has a tendency to wrap up all of the loose ends by having a character monologue at the end, the way that comic book villains do, or he'll have an interrogation where everything comes out, or somebody leaves a diary that just explains all of the issues and things that you were wondering. And sometimes it's very like, oh, okay, so this is where I have to suspend disbelief again, because really every loose end was tied up and by this one person talking, and they left a diary that explained everything. And oftentimes anything that's in an interrogation or that's written down or anything like that is in a different font or italics, and I usually just skip past those pages. I'm like, I don't want everything revealed to me that way. Show me, don't tell me. So, my last bit of commentary on the books as a whole, before we move on to the individual books, is that most of these books are set in L.A., which is a city of LA is very much a character in and of itself. And I've spent a great deal of time in LA, although I've never lived there. But I've never actually been to any of the restaurants that he mentions in the books. A lot of restaurants come up. They have lunch and dinner, and they meet people there. And Milo's a big eater, and Alex is a foodie, although he doesn't seem to be that much of a big eater. Every time they go to a restaurant, I always wonder if it's real. And then there's some scenes that are set in New York City, and I think some of those restaurants are real. The only restaurant that's referenced that I know for a fact is real, even though I haven't been there, is he talks about Musso and Frank a lot. And I never really cared about going to Musso and Frank before reading these books, but now I do. Now I want to go to Musso and Frank. So good job, Kellerman, if that was... if this was just a whole, multiple book series commercial for Musso and Frank, you've done your job. But what it really is a commercial for Indian food. Because every time I read any of the books where Milo, in later books, he has a second office at an Indian restaurant down the street from the police precinct, and they bring him just plates and plates and plates of food. And every time I read those scenes, I want Indian food. Alex tends to like Jewish delis. And the books make me hungry for Jewish delis. And I love a good pastrami, corned beef, etc. But there are no good Jewish delis where I live. There's one particularly good Indian restaurant and a lot of okay Indian restaurants, and then there's another almost as good Indian restaurant near my job, which is like an hour away. But I have not found... if those who don't know, I live in the Madison, Wisconsin area and work in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. There's at least one Jewish deli in Milwaukee that I have found, and it's okay. It's not it's not anything to write home about. Madison used to have Ella's Deli, which was incredible, but not for the food. The decor was what brought you there. And I think when you Google Jewish delis in Wisconsin, one of the places that comes up is Bagels Forever. And I love Bagels Forever, and in fact, Dan and Todd's food vlog did an episode there. But I wouldn't consider it a Jewish deli, other than the fact that they serve bagels. There's nothing Jewish about it at all. I don't believe it's kosher, and you can't get a sandwich on anything other than a bagel. So, anyhow, this is making me hungry. So I guess I'll have to go and have a late lunch after filming this, and probably continue reading the Kellerman books while I sit and enjoy my lunch. So I hope that I have found some kindred spirits that also read these books and pick apart the details the way that I do, and I hope you'll participate with me by commenting on these videos. Feel free to reach out to me on social media, like, comment, and subscribe, all those things. Thanks for watching.